In Terraforming Mars, players play a future corporation that is looking to terraform the planet Mars to prepare it for human habitation. Earth is on its last legs ecologically, and space entrepreneurs are going to save the human race by colonizing their neighbor. We'll go over the basics, but for a more thorough how to play, be sure to watch Rodney's tutorial over on Watch It Played. You'll start off with some mega credits, the currency of the game, and the player needs to pay for projects which will in turn give some income, resources, or resources production. There are 6 main resources in the game: mega credits, steel and titanium, which effectively give discounts on cards that have steel and titanium tags, plant resources, energy resources, and heat resources. These enable players to buy more projects and other actions in future rounds. The goal is to terraform the planet so that the players will raise the temperature of the planet from -30 to 8 degrees Celsius, raise the oxygen meter from 0% to 14%, and place 9 ocean tiles on the board. To raise the temperature one step, either pay 14 mega credits as a standard project, or produce 8 heat resources, or play a card that shifts the temperature by one step. To raise the oxygen meter, pay 23 mega credits as a standard project, or pay 8 plant resources to produce a greenery tile, 7 plant resources if you are the Ecoline Corporation, or use an action card that specifically raises the oxygen by one step. And to place an ocean tile, players can pay 18 mega credits by using a standard project or player project card. Once these 3 conditions are met and Mars is completely terraformed, the game ends and players are awarded points for a variety of conditions. Each round starts with a card draft, where players choose a project card they want to keep and pass the rest along. From the 4 cards, players can spend 3 mega credits to buy a card. Players will then perform 1 or 2 actions to pay for the projects or take actions on their project cards or purchase milestones or awards. Project cards have a cost, and players have to weigh up if the project will be worth it. Players can also perform an action on some blue cards. This can be anything from taking a resource or getting some victory points. Milestones can be bought if the player has achieved the necessary requirements, and these are essentially a race to secure victory points early in the game. Awards can be bought at any time, but these get counted at the end of the game. Players will also place cities, greenery tiles, and ocean tiles onto the map of the board to secure victory points for final scoring, and this offers a pretty interesting area control aspect to the game. At the end of each round is an income phase where players gain the resources for use in the next round. What makes Terraforming Mars a brilliant game is that even after many hours of playing the game, there are still difficult decisions to be made from start to finish. At the heart of this is the 200 different project cards that make this all possible. As the cards are randomized for each game, this ensures that most games turn out pretty differently for every player. There's always a difficult decision deciding what cards to buy. Some cards are useful at the beginning, and some are better at the end. Building up a cohesive strategy between the various cards can be very challenging. You don't always get the cards you want and have to make do with cards that aren't as good. The terraforming aspect of the game, which is played out on the board itself, feels very much like an area control game, as players stake out the best spots on the map and block opponents' advantages. A player that disregards the map hands significant advantages and bonuses to the opponent and makes it very difficult to win. Strategy is where the game shines brightest. Most of the games I played were 2-player games, and while the game is still fun with higher player counts, in 2-player games there's less downtime waiting for a turn, and adding more human players introduces more luck and chaos. The game feels like a tug of war between 2 players. It's a balance of knowing which strategies to go for and how to attack and block your opponent. It's not possible to defend everything, nor get the best cards for everything, and there's simply not enough mega credits to do everything you want to. In a number of games I played and lost, my opponent specifically targeted my corporation advantages. In one game I played the Helion Corporation, which gave me a 3 heat production advantage. My opponent reacted by competing in temperature terraforming. In another game, I played Saturn Systems, which meant any Jovian tag card played in the game gave me 1 mega credit production, and my opponent drafted all the Jovian tag cards away. Some people seem to dislike the negative cards and actions that attack opponents, but I think these work fine in 2-player games. It's fine to take something away from an opponent as long as that opponent can do the same back. For example, in a 3-player game, these negative cards don't work as well because 2 players can gang up and attack the 3rd player. The 2 opponents could also attack each other, and the 3rd player ends up being a net positive because he neither spent money nor lost resources. Thus, the negative cards make sense in a 2-player game. The game is played roughly on average across 14 rounds, less if players rush to terraform, and more if players hold out for more income and resources to buy projects. A significant part of the strategy is deciding what projects to buy and complete. Cards that have resource production can be beneficial early on in the game. Similarly, cards that only score victory points may be better later on in the game. Despite that, it's still possible to do the opposite and succeed. Let's talk about the things that I do like about the PC version to begin with. And the first thing is that it looks great and all things considered pretty streamlined versus the board game version. With the board game, there's always the hassle of managing money and resources, and there's always the danger of bumping over the player board and knocking all the markers. Playing the PC version, I was able to reduce a 2-player game down to a comfortable 2 hours, whereas the board game version could easily go on for an hour longer. There are still some bugs in the game, though a lot less than there were initially. One that really grates: if you play a card that steals resources, but your opponent has nothing to steal, you have to steal your own. There's no undo button for this either. Also, I've been kicked out of games where my internet connection has been a bit shaky, so I'd wish the game was a little bit more stable. That said, the game has a pretty nice resume feature where even if you restart the computer, you can resume the game at the exact point, so no progress is lost. One thing that I'd like added are text descriptions for tiles that are already placed. Some tiles, like the factory tile, look very similar to city tiles, so it's difficult to recall what the tile is. Finally, there's not really much for the solo player in the PC version. It's a good way to learn the game. The tutorial is fine if a bit unexciting, and the AI is pretty weak in single player. The solo mode is pretty cool though, and mirrors the board game version, and is a good way to learn to be efficient. In conclusion, Terraforming Mars is an amazingly well executed and tightly designed board game which now has a fun streamlined PC version. I generally recommend the 2-player game as the push-pull tug-of-war effect is really fun. The game's designed so no player can attempt to do everything and no player can completely block out an opponent. Players are figuring out what cards to choose to maximize their opportunities, and the game, when played carefully, punishes players that make mistakes. With many games coming down to less than 5 to 10 points, taking an action at just the right time can be very valuable if you can get in ahead of your opponent. And lastly, the thing I love most about the game is that there's simply no right strategy. Games can be won in a variety of ways, from being purely project card focused or purely terraforming focused to rushing the board to producing more resources. It can be won with any of the corporations, and it can be won with a good or bad opening hand of cards. It can be won with bad project card draws. But in general, the game still rewards strategic gameplay, efficient evaluation of cards, a fight for competition on the board, competing in terraforming steps, awards, and milestones. Still, after over 100 hours, I'm still immensely enjoying rolling the dice on a new corporation and a new set of 10 project cards every time to try to piece together a new winning strategy. Overall, I would give Terraforming Mars a 10 out of 10 for the game itself and a 9 out of 10 for the PC version, as there could be some things that could be improved on. But if you're a fan of the board game, the PC version is a very nice alternative for when you don't feel the need to get the physical game out.